This podcast contains descriptions of violence against children and adult language and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hi guys, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Lane, and this is episode 39, Zahra Baker, Part 2. Last week, I started telling you the story of 10-year-old Zahra Baker, who kept her brilliant smile and sunshiny outlook despite surviving 2 bouts of cancer, the amputation of 1 leg, the loss of her hearing, and growing up without her mother. When her father brought a new woman into her life, Zahra was excited to have a stepmother, but as soon as the family moved from Australia to the stepmother's native state of North Carolina, Zahra began showing up at school with bruises when she showed up at all. In October of 2010, Adam and Elisa Baker reported Zahra missing, but within days, Elisa started talking and leading investigators to multiple locations where parts of Zahra's little body had been dumped. This is the conclusion of the unbelievable story of Zahra Baker. If you haven't listened to episode 38, which was part 1 of Zahra's story, I recommend doing that before you listen to this one. My sources for today's episode were the Charlotte Observer, the Hickory Record, WSOC-TV, WRAL, WBTV, Wikipedia, AOL News Archive, the Daily Mail, Connie Moments blog, Drum Funeral Home, The Observer News Enterprise, The Daily Telegraph, ABC News, The Associated Press, The Advertiser, Mock Forums, Live 5 News, The Sydney Morning Herald, the North Carolina General Assembly website, and court documents, as well as 60 Minutes Australia. Before I jump into Zahra's story, please listen first to the promo for another great podcast, A Little Bit Grim.
Hi, I'm Taylor.
Hi, I'm Jenny.
Are you into ghosts, aliens, or murder? It's okay if you do, because we love terrible things too.
It's why we started our podcast, A Little Bit Grim.
We talk about the paranormal,
True crime,
folklore,
cults,
conspiracies,
some disasters,
and every other heinous thing that could possibly happen to a person.
It's a little bit spooky.
It's a little bit funny.
And it's a little bit grim.
And you can find us wherever you like to stream your podcasts.
And find us on your favorite social media platforms.
We'll see you there. Goodbye!
If you're interested in the darker side of things and sometimes laughing about them, give Jenny and Taylor a listen. One more thing before I get started. Thank you to my newest patron, Lisa J. from Georgia. Thank you so much, Lisa. I truly appreciate every one of my supporters who bring me that much closer to my goal of devoting myself full-time to the podcast and the blog on a permanent basis, even post-quarantine. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to make a monthly pledge, you can do so by visiting www.sufferthelittlechildrenpod.com and clicking Become a Patron in the upper right-hand corner, or by visiting sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com/support, where in addition to monthly pledges, I can also accept one-time donations. If you're interested in supporting the podcast or the blog in a non-financial way, leaving 5-star ratings and reviews on your favorite podcast player is very helpful, and you can also follow me on social media at STLCblog and at STLCpod on Twitter, or Suffer the Little Children blog and Suffer the Little Children pod on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Pinterest. I know this subject matter is hard to stomach, but if you're listening right now, I know you feel as strongly as I do that these babies deserve to have their names and faces remembered and their stories told. On that note, I'll pick up where I left off last week with the conclusion of Zahra's story. At the end of last week's episode, I talked about continued searches for Zahra's remains, which her stepmother, Elisa Baker, had told police had been scattered all over North Carolina's Caldwell and Catawba counties, and the Baker family, At this point, only Adam Baker remained alive and free, had been evicted from the home owned by Mark Coffey on 21st Avenue Northwest in Hickory. On November 6, 2010, Zahra's father, Adam Baker, along with his mother, brother, and some other supporters, were seen at the home, removing more of the family's belongings. They left behind a bit of a mess, including Zahra's closet full of clothes with toys all over the floor, although, to be fair, investigators had left a mess of their own when they cut out sections of the walls and floors and removed drain traps and sinks as evidence. 2 days later, Catawba County District Attorney Jay Gaither asked the North Carolina Attorney General to assist in speeding up the testing of evidence in the case. At this point, investigators were unsure if Adam had anything to do with his daughter's death or disappearance. Elisa had been running her mouth for days, trying to lay the blame on Adam for dismembering 10-year-old Zahra and helping her dump the parts of the little girl's body in various locations. As searches continued, more of Zahra's remains were found along the banks of the Little River off Dudley Shoals Road in Caldwell County. Most of the locations where Zahra's body parts had been discarded were near places where either Elisa alone or the Baker family had lived at some point. On November 11, 2010, Zahra's biological mother, Emily Dietrich, arrived in the U.S., bringing with her a TV crew from Australian news station 7 News, including reporter Robert Ovadia. Emily provided police with DNA swabs to complete Zahra's DNA profile. While investigators had obtained a profile from items found in Zahra's home, they also wanted to create a profile from her 2 biological parents for comparison. The week before she arrived and prior to the location of Zahra's prosthetic leg, Emily had given Rob Ovadia an exclusive interview in Australia, saying she doubted she would ever see Zahra alive again. "I don't feel it. Mothers just have this bond with their children, and just having no hope in me makes it hurt even more. With what they're finding and how they're saying she was treated, the only hope I have in me now is that she's gone, so that she's not being hurt anymore." Emily had searched for Zahra for years, at least as much as her financial situation allowed, but tragically she had only learned her daughter's last location a few days before Zahra's disappearance was reported. During Emily's visit, she visited the memorial at the former Baker house. Ovadia later said, "You could tell as time went on and reality sank in of coming here and having a connection with this story, that in her words it would be a lot more real to her. She was getting a lot more nervous, and that culminated when she turned up to the shrine at the house. That was about as raw a human emotion as I've ever seen. She was gutted." Ovadia said it was important that Emily came to the memorial and spoke with neighbors about Zahra. She wanted some sort of connection with her daughter that she hasn't had over the years, and that meant coming here, going to the shrine, and seeing the photos and letters from people who didn't know Zahra too well either, just an affinity with her daughter and the story. After visiting the shrine, Ovadia drove Emily away from the site so she could gather herself. They turned down a side street, and Emily asked him to stop in front of a house that struck her as peaceful. The residents of the house were Lisa and David Ridgway, who exchanged contact information with Emily and invited her to stay at their house. She initially declined, as the news station traveling with her had reserved a room for her at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Hickory. A few days later, Emily spoke with the Ridgways again and said the media found them at the hotel and wouldn't leave them alone. The Ridgways again offered her a place to stay, and this time she accepted, striking up a friendship with the kind former neighbors of Zahra's family, whose own daughter was away at college, so they had an unoccupied room ready for Emily to use. Lisa Ridgway said, "God led her to my house, that's all I can say about it. She seemed very relieved to have a female companion. We loved on her quite a bit." On November 12th, during Emily's visit to the U.S., the results of DNA testing returned, and Hickory Police Chief Tom Adkins once again spoke with the press, this time delivering the bad news everyone expected, but dreaded nonetheless.
"It is with great regret I stand before you today. I've been dreading this moment early on in this investigation. As investigators, we are trained to follow the leads, but never give up the hope that the evidence may take us in the wrong direction, and the outcome will be different. We have recovered enough physical evidence to believe we have found Zahra. Please understand that I cannot get into many specifics about the investigation, but the DNA evidence from the bone found on Christie Road matched a DNA sample from the house on 21st Avenue Northwest. The sample from the home was taken from personal items believed to be Zahra. Remains found at Dudley Shoals Road in Caldwell County have been sent to the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office and then to the State Bureau of Investigation Lab for positive identification. According to medical examiner staff on site, when the remains were recovered, they are consistent with a child. Until that test is complete, we cannot officially confirm they are Zahra's. This is still a developing case, and we are gathering all facts we feel exist. Investigators, agents, and officers and staff who have worked on this case are devastated that we're not able to find Zahra alive and bring her home safely. We appreciate the support we receive from the public. Today, our community mourns, our state mourns, our nation mourns, and the world mourns as we go forward.
Devastated, Emily Dietrich returned to Australia on November 14th, taking a suitcase full of mementos from the memorial in front of the former Baker house, where she had spent much of her time in Hickory. Emily's new friend, Lisa Ridgway, told the Hickory Daily Record, "She felt closer to her there, that's the bottom line. She would go there trying to feel some kind of connection, then get overwhelmed and come back." Emily had received some angry emails from the Australian public and worried her time in America would be similar, but she was pleasantly surprised. Lisa said, "She was hugged by a lot of people. She was perfectly happy to talk to people. She said all she got was support." When she left, Emily asked Lisa and David to donate some of the toys from the shrine to the HPD's Cops for Tots program. Lisa said, "We took 125 toys to the police department, but there are so many toys left at the tree, you can't tell that we took any." The Ridgways promised to send Emily notes and letters gathered from the shrine. Lisa said, "She wanted to take everything. Everything meant so much to her." On November 16th, close to 2,000 people attended a memorial to Zahra at Union Square in downtown Hickory on what would have been her 11th birthday. At the memorial, several people, including Hickory Police Chief Tom Adkins, spoke.
As part of her treatment, her left leg above the knee was amputated. Most of us wanted us to feel sorry for her, but she did not want pity from anyone, as one family member told me. She wanted to be like every other child. As part of her therapy, Zahra would do water exercises. As another family member told me, eventually she started swimming, and she became a very good swimmer. She could swim as fast as any others with just the top part of her left leg. Also, she would climb a rock wall as part of her recovery. Nothing would slow her down. She wanted no pity. She wanted to be like every other child. Her cancer would spread to her lung, and she would have surgery to remove part of it. She had a scar under her right arm in the shape of an X, and she would tell her family, "X marks the spot to my heart." While in the hospital, she would make her rounds to other children, hopping on just one leg. She would provide them with encouragement for their upcoming treatment. She would laugh and play games, taking their minds off what was to come.
Thousands of stuffed animals and toys were brought to the vigil and subsequently donated to the Hickory PD's Cops for Tots program as well. On the same day, a similar memorial ceremony was held for Zahra in Australia by the sea. Her best friend attended to honor Zahra's memory.
Happy birthday to you.
Zahra was my best friend, and I wish she was still here, but I know she's gone to a better place.
We love her, and we will never ever forget her smile. And this is her birthday today, and we just want to say happy birthday, Zahra.
I mentioned in part 1 that Elisa and Adam Baker both faced multiple charges unrelated to Zahra's death and disappearance, so let's talk about that for a moment. Adam and Elisa were scheduled to appear in Caldwell County Court on November 18, 2010, on charges of writing bad checks and communicating threats, but their attorneys both showed up in their places. Combined, the couple faced 18 bad check charges, worth a total of $2,054.58. All but one of the checks were written at local grocery stores. That one check worth $595 was for back rent, according to the Bakers' former landlord, Mark Sims. Mark had rented the single-wide mobile home to the Bakers in the County Manor Estates mobile home park. He served an eviction notice against Adam Baker, who owed $1,114 in back rent in December of 2009. 3 months later, he filed an eviction notice against Elisa, who owed $1,612 in back rent by then. He couldn't remember why 2 separate eviction notices were served against the Bakers. He said he didn't speak to them often, but when he did, they were polite. When he called Elisa to tell her she was late on rent, he said, "She said, I will bring you by a check today, and she brought one by." When the $595 check bounced, she apologized and brought Mark cash for part of what she owed. Mark said, "She was never angry with me." As for the charges of communicating threats, those stemmed from an incident that took place in May of 2010, prior to Zahra's death. According to a later interview with one of the complainants, 15-year-old Corinne Yount, she and fellow neighborhood resident 16-year-old Brandy Hefner noticed Zahra crying as she walked up a steep hill by the Bakers' mobile home. Corinne said, "She was making Zahra walk up the hill by herself because that's how she would punish her because she knew it would hurt Zahra's leg." Elisa came out of the trailer and started screaming at and threatening the girls. Corinne said, "She said, 'I'm going to teach these two teenagers a lesson and whip their butts.'" When Brandy's mother came out of her trailer and asked what was going on, Elisa reportedly retreated into her home. Corinne said she had spoken with Zahra a few times and described her as a very sweet girl. She said neighbors knew Elisa was abusive to Zahra and had made reports about it. "You could hear Zahra screaming and Elisa yelling at her, so we would call the police. We called DSS on her too, but they never did anything." Corinne and Brandy reported Elisa's threats toward them on May 23, 2010. Just the previous day, on May 22nd, Adam and Elisa were both arrested and charged with communicating threats against Elisa's nephew, Zachary Tyler, his fiancée, Brittany Bentley, whose TV interview you heard in Part 1, and their 7-month-old daughter. It had to do with a debt Zachary and Brittany apparently owed the Bakers. Zachary said in his complaint against Adam, "He chased me and my fiancée. He literally tried to run us off the road twice. He got in the opposite lane, swerved at the driver's side, and we had to swerve to keep from getting hit. Then he passed us and slammed his brakes. We had to slam our brakes and still almost hit him." The young couple went home and got the money to pay Elisa what they owed her, but she demanded more, she and Adam reportedly threatening Zachary and Brittany with tasers. Zachary said in his statement, "They said they would kill me and Brittany Bentley, and that they knew where our daughter was, and they would kill her if I didn't pay her." Brittany said in her complaint against Elisa, "Then she went to my mom's, where my daughter was, with a supposed gun after she threatened to kill my daughter. I fear for mine, and my daughter's, and fiancé's life." Because of this incident, Adam was charged with assault with a deadly weapon for trying to run them off the road. Those weren't all of the charges Adam and Elisa faced in court either. They also faced charges of failing to return rental property, for which they had been arrested in March of 2010. They were accused of failing to return a laptop computer, a 42-inch Zenith TV, a stereo, and a living room suite, worth a total of $2,411.69, all of which they had rented from Best Way Rent to Own in Lenoir. On the rental application, Elisa listed her occupation as disabled and her monthly income as $591. On June 30, 2010, they failed to appear in court on those charges, leading to charges of failure to appear against both of them. In mid-November of 2010, the former Baker house at 21 21st Avenue Northwest in Hickory was vandalized, its windows broken by unknown perpetrators. No one was ever arrested. In addition, area residents had started posting signs at the house expressing anger toward Adam, Elisa, and the investigation. On November 21st, homeowner Mark Coffey, Adam's former boss, removed the memorial surrounding a tree in the front yard of the home and even cut down the tree itself, donating the toys and stuffed animals that had been left there to the HPD's Cops for Tots program. Many people were infuriated by the removal of the shrine, but this poor man owned the house and relied on renting it out as part of his income. It had already sustained heavy but necessary damage when investigators took parts of the walls, floors, plumbing drains, and other pieces as evidence, and after vandals broke out the windows in November, Mark Coffey could no longer risk further loss by allowing the house to remain the focal point of the public's grief and anger. Another makeshift memorial had been created for Zahra near Christie Road in Caldwell County, where the first of her remains had been located. Jake Eisenhower, the owner of the property where that memorial was located, later announced his intention to turn it from a temporary memorial into a permanent one, which stands to this day. Also in mid-November, it was uncovered via court documents that Elisa was still married to her former husband, Aaron Young, when she and Adam married in July of 2008. At that point, it was also revealed that Elisa had been married 7 times. Reporters continued to follow Adam around, trying to grab sound bites whenever they could. He told WVTV, "There is no way I would have done that to my baby. There is no way in the world I would have hurt my daughter."
What do you think happened to Zahra?
I don't know.
What, do you think your wife might have had some involvement in all it?
I don't know.
What is it that you want for Zahra?
Make sure Elisa gets what she deserves. Get this behind me, take Zahra back to Australia and finally lay her to rest.
You want to bury Zahra in Australia?
Yeah.
At some point shortly after Zahra's death, Adam's mother, Zahra's nan, Karen Baker, flew from Australia to support him in North Carolina and to get answers. According to Australian newspaper, the Sydney Morning Herald, by mid-November of 2010, the two lived in a grimy block of flats down a dank gully outside town, venturing out infrequently in his aging two-door Mazda, which has the words "Zoom Zoom Racing" on the sides. Adam's bed was a small mattress on the floor of their apartment's cluttered living room. The reporter described Adam at that point as wary and withdrawn. He has thick, muscled arms and a broad chest that were built with work or weights, but seem to have sagged in idleness. He carries a saggy paunch. There are dark rings beneath his eyes, and he frequently looks away when talking. He seems tired, disheveled, and acquiescent. Karen is kindly but fiercely protective of the son who mostly defers to her. On November 30th, Catawba County Superior Court unsealed 13 search warrants, which revealed that Zahra was dismembered in the family's bathtub, and her body parts and other evidence were distributed amongst sites in Hickory as well as in Burke and Caldwell counties. The warrants also indicated that Zahra's hearing aid parts were found and seized from the Baker home. In addition, the documents stated that it was alleged by a source who said he heard it from another man who in turn heard it from his sister that Zahra was raped by two men related to Elisa's ex-husband, Aaron Young. The men were Aaron's cousins, Louis James Young, who went by James, and Timothy Samuel Young, who went by Sammy. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation followed up on the tip on October 15th, visiting James and Sammy at their home at 8630 County Line Road in Hildebrand. They found James inside the house and a mattress with a large, dark stain in its center laying on the ground at the side of the house. James told investigators he removed the mattress from the house to let it air out due to the fact that he had urinated on it. James told investigators he knew Zahra but didn't think she was at his house. The same day, investigators obtained a search warrant for their property. Both men were investigated, passed polygraph tests, and were not charged. On December 1st, 2010, bones that had been found on November 10th at the Dudley Shoals Road search location were identified as belonging to Zahra after the DNA was confirmed by the SBI and the medical examiner. On December 2nd, about 100 people attended Zahra's public memorial service at Drum Funeral Home in Hickory. Another private service for family and close friends had already taken place in late November. On the following day, December 3rd, WSOC-TV reported that an unnamed source told them a written agreement was reached between Elisa and the DA's office in which she would not be charged with first-degree murder due to her cooperation in the case. That would mean that sentences of life in prison or the death penalty would be off the table. Adding some credence to this report was the fact that just the day before, the Office of the Capital Defender had terminated Lisa Dubb's appointment as Elisa Baker's attorney, but nonetheless, she stayed on to represent Elisa. However, a few days later, Catawba County District Attorney Jay Gaither announced that the WSOC report was incorrect and that life in prison and death were both still sentencing options. He said Elisa maintained her innocence in Zahra's death, but had cooperated with the investigation. However, if there was evidence to prove she was involved, the state had no obligation to limit the charges filed against her. In mid-December of 2010, the Hickory Police Department turned over its preliminary case file to the DA's office, although Chief Tom Adkins said the investigation was still ongoing and more evidence could follow. The beginning of the new year saw more information being released to the public about Zahra's case when, on January 5, 2011, 30 more search warrants were unsealed. Within these warrants was the revelation that, according to Elisa, Zahra had died on September 24, 2010, which is the date used to mark her passing to this day. Elisa also told investigators that Zahra's body parts were scattered the following day. The warrants indicated that Elisa had an ongoing relationship with her ex-husband, Aaron Young, as well as a sexual relationship with Aaron's cousin, Sammy Young, who you might remember was accused of raping Zahra the night she died. Elisa and Sammy apparently did illicit drugs together at some point as well. Elisa's full relationship with drugs was not yet disclosed, but hang in there, we'll talk about that soon enough. The warrants showed that police had requested information about landline and cellular telephone numbers from Verizon Wireless, Carolina West Wireless, T-Mobile, and Charter Communications, as well as information from the Department of Social Services in several counties including Burke, Catawba, Cleveland, Caldwell, Lincoln, and Alexander, regarding Elisa's biological children, Brittany Nicole Proctor, Amber Dawn Fairchild, and Douglas Lee Proctor. On January 6th, Elisa's aunt, Bonchetta Buzzy Winkler, told a reporter that Elisa told her about Zahra. She'd been sick 2 weeks before she died. When they found her, I guess they didn't know what to do. They just went wild. She said Elisa told her both she and Adam participated in Zahra's dismemberment, although Elisa reportedly told police and would later state in prison interviews that Adam alone dismembered Zahra before they both hid her remains. You know what they say, if you just tell the truth, you don't have to keep track of your lies. Elisa's apparent inability to keep her bullshit straight was likely her greatest downfall. In January of 2011, Elisa Baker was indicted on a charge of bigamy for being legally married to Aaron Young when she married Adam Baker in July of 2008. A month later, on February 21st, Elisa would receive her biggest charge of all when she was indicted on a single count of second-degree murder. District Attorney Jay Gaither subsequently gave a press conference announcing the development in Zahra's case.
I'm the District Attorney for the 25th District, representing Burke, Caldwell, and Catawba County. Earlier today, the Catawba County Grand Jury returned a true bill of indictment naming Elisa Annette Baker in the murder of Zahra Claire Baker. The Grand Jury deliberated, and their finding of second-degree murder with aggravating factors was returned before Judge Robert Urban and subsequently filed with the Catawba County Clerk's Court at approximately 12 noon. The indictment reads as follows. The count of second-degree murder, the jurors of the state, upon their oath, present that on or about the date of offense shown, September 24th, 2010, in the county named above, Catawba County, the defendant named above, Elisa Annette Baker, did unlawfully, willfully, and feloniously, with malice aforethought, kill and murder Zahra Claire Baker. As to aggravating factors, the jurors for the state, upon their oath, presented that with respect to the offense alleged in count 1, the charge of murder in the second degree, that there were the following 5 aggravating factors related to sentencing pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 15A-1340. The defendant, Elisa Baker, had a history and pattern of physical, verbal, and psychological abuse of the victim, Zahra Baker. That the defendant, Elisa Baker, secreted the victim, Zahra Baker, from family and others prior to and after the offense, delaying detection of the offense. That the defendant, number 3, Elisa Baker, desecrated the body of Zahra Baker to hinder detection, investigation, and prosecution of the offense. Number 4, that the victim, Zahra Baker, was very young, physically infirm, or handicapped. Number 5, that the defendant, Elisa Baker, took advantage of a position of trust or confidence, including a domestic relationship, to commit the offense. At this time, the state has no credible evidence to suggest that anyone other than Elisa Baker was involved in the murder of Zahra Claire Baker. I want to thank law enforcement for their hard work in the investigation, and at this point I recognize Hickory City Chief of Police, Tom Atkins. Tom.
The indictment of second-degree murder on Elisa Baker today is a milestone of holding someone accountable that members of Team Zahra have been working towards since the first words spoken on that 911 call made October 9, 2010. We will continue our investigation and follow every lead until the first day of trial. Also, we will continue to work with District Attorney Jay Gaither in his office to provide a thorough investigative file and the facts of this case for the prosecution of Zahra's death. Over the last 4 months, many different theories of how and who is responsible for the death of Zahra have been made by anyone who has followed this case. Not every case is clear-cut, and only the facts and evidence of the case can dictate who is charged and for what offenses. We concur with the decision made today by the Catawba County Grand Jury. Not a day goes by that members of this team of professionals have not thought of Zahra.
As a result of the murder charge, Elisa's bond was naturally increased, now totaling over $300,000. On the same day the charge was announced, the results of Zahra's autopsy were released. Her death was ruled caused by undetermined homicidal violence. The report showed that Zahra's head, lower left arm and hand, full right arm and hand, lower right leg and foot, the 1st through 4th cervical vertebrae, and her sternum were not found. The autopsy report stated that Zahra's remains were identified through DNA from her toothbrush, as well as a profile composed of DNA from her biological parents, Adam Baker and Emily Dietrich. The condition of Zahra's remains was listed as decomposed and skeletonized. The medical examiner's notes read, "Several of the bones exhibit cutting tool marks that are consistent with dismemberment. The marks grossly appear to result from the use of at least 2 different cutting instruments. Tool marks appeared on the vertebrae, right femur, and left clavicle, and there were rib fractures. There were also marks where animals had scavenged at the bones." The injuries proved that Zahra was dismembered after she died. There were 2 distinct cut marks at her 5th cervical vertebra, near the upper part of the spine. There was also a cut mark on her left collarbone, and 11 cut marks on the right femur, ranging from 9 millimeters to 22 millimeters. The end of the bone was partially cut through and then fractured. The right 5th rib had a 22 millimeter bone spur, and the 5th and 6th ribs on the right side were broken at some point and had since healed, which the report opines may have occurred during a surgical procedure, such as the surgery Zahra underwent in 2007 to remove part of one lung due to cancer. So Elisa had been charged, which left many wondering, what about Adam? The DA's office said they had no credible evidence to believe anyone else was involved in the murder of Zahra Claire Baker, which meant they had effectively cleared Adam Baker of any knowledge or involvement in Zahra's death or dismemberment, or in the dispersal of her remains after the fact. As incredible as it may seem, Adam apparently did not know his daughter was missing from the tiny house for 15 days. At first, police said, they found it hard to believe that, but after interviewing him for a combined total of about 80 hours, and considering the physical evidence, they determined he had no involvement in Zahra's disappearance. According to an Australian news site, The Advertiser, a senior North Carolina law enforcement officer spoke with them about Adam's ignorance, saying, "What kind of man would beat a woman in a goth online chat room? Fly her over to Australia. Look at her. She's not exactly a winsome woman. He marries her, and then takes his cancer-ridden, one-legged, deaf daughter, who's being taken care of, to America? What kind of guy would do that in the first place? You're talking about a wholesale idiot. This goes to what I've always believed about him, that he is almost pathologically numb-nutted. I don't know his IQ, but he is the self-confessed worst dad in the world. Given the alternatives, the only alternative is that he was unaware." Honestly, as difficult as it is for some to believe, I do think Adam was legitimately as clueless about what was going on in that house as investigators thought. He seemed to accept Elisa's lies as the absolute truth, no matter how unbelievable they were. Adam and his mother appeared on 60 Minutes Australia.
Zahra had been my life, Now she's gone. I don't know what to do. I feel very, very empty.
What was it about Lisa, do you think?
She was very caring then.
What were you hoping for? What did you think your life was going to be like?
Happy family, a lot of love, more children, brothers and sisters for Zahra. But it didn't turn out that way. It's very hard to see people on the street, even people in their cars driving, staring, yelling.
What do they yell?
I need to be locked up. I'm going to go to hell. That I'm a murderer.
Are you guilty of anything?
No.
When you had heard that Zahra had disappeared, can you recall your reaction?
Honestly believed I'd never see her again.
Really?
I just had this feeling. People might think it's silly, but this little voice said to me, "Don't worry, Nan, I'm all right." I didn't want to believe it, but I think deep down I knew. I don't know if I want to know all the ins and outs, but I still want to know what happened.
You need to know.
I need to know what happened.
It is a fact that Zahra was dismembered, and that is horrifying. Do you have any words for that?
It's not something I like to think about. It makes me sick. somebody could do that.
Lisa alleges you were involved in that.
Yeah, that's what she says.
Lisa alleges that you and she disposed of Zahra's body. Is that untrue?
That's the biggest lie she's ever told. For starters, there's no way I could do that to my child. For her to sit there and say that I dismembered my child, there's no way on earth that I could do that.
Do you believe that Lisa had anything to do with the disappearance of Zahra?
I feel that she had something to do with this.
And what do you think that is?
I'm not sure. There's so many things that try to pop into my head that may have happened that I don't want to think about. Thinking about it's just too hard and heartbreaking.
Is it not possible that Zahra died of an illness?
No.
You don't believe that?
No, I don't believe that for a second.
Is it not possible that Zahra died 2 weeks before she was reported missing?
No.
You saw her not long before she disappeared?
Yeah.
At the time of Zahra's disappearance, you seemed uncertain about when you last saw her.
Yeah.
Are you able to clear that up?
It's very hard to talk about stuff with the case at the moment because it still is a ongoing investigation. And I really don't want to do anything that may impede any justice for Zahra.
I guess it's the one thing that people have trouble with.
Oh, yeah.
And you understand that?
Yeah, I understand that.
I suppose you're starting to wonder who this person is.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know this person.
Did you ever see Lisa mistreating Zahra?
No.
Neighbours and relatives claim they saw abuse and that Zahra had a black eye. Did you ever see that?
Yes, I saw the black eye.
And what did you ask about that?
I asked both Lisa and Zahra how that happened. Well, Lisa started out saying Zahra slipped in the bathroom. Hit her head on the cabinet. Zahra backed that up.
Why do you think she said that?
Right now, what I think is she was told to. She was scared.
Is there anything you haven't said that you're frightened to say?
Oh, no.
You have no doubts that you will have no case to answer?
I've done nothing. I had no part in my daughter's death or dismemberment.
You can't watch any child go through all that Zahra did and think that he could do that. You just can't. He wouldn't do it. He just wants to know the same as we want to know. What happened? Who did it?
Do you think you know?
Oh, yeah, she's sitting in jail. Oh, yeah. That's my feeling. That's my opinion.
What has been the worst decision you made?
Now, looking back, bringing Lisa into our lives.
You believe that was the downfall?
Yeah.
You believe Zahra would be alive today?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
When this is all over, what are your plans?
My plans are to take Zahra back to Australia. Back home. Move back there. Try to put some pieces of my life back together.
The legal system was nowhere near finished with Elisa or Adam Baker. In February of 2011, Elisa was charged with identity theft and obtaining property under false pretenses. Accused of using her daughter Brittany Starbuck's personal information to obtain phone and utility services at one of the family's multiple residences in March of 2010. She pleaded not guilty to the 4 counts of identity theft in May of 2011. Then, in April of the same year, Adam Baker was also charged with identity theft and obtaining property under false pretenses. It was alleged that he used the identity and social security number of Elisa's son-in-law, Brittany's husband, James Starbuck, to have power connected to his apartment. When the new charges were filed, Adam was ordered not to leave North Carolina without notifying the DA's office, And he was also ordered to wear an electronic ankle monitor and meet with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement once a week. Since he had been planning to return to Australia shortly, this was a major crimp in his plans. This is where Elisa's relationship with drugs rears its head, and this was a huge revelation. Elisa was indicted on 7 federal drug charges stemming from activities that took place between May of 2006 and October of 2010. The charges of possessing, distributing, and conspiring to distribute prescription drugs alleged that Elisa, using different addresses in both Catawba and Caldwell counties, had sold tens of thousands of pills, including oxycodone and hydrocodone, both narcotic pain relievers, and alprazolam, a prescription anti-anxiety medication. The 3 drugs are better known as their brand names, OxyContin, Vicodin, and Xanax, respectively. These charges brought Elisa's total number of charges to over 20. On June 2, 2011, Elisa pleaded not guilty to all 7 federal drug charges. Once again, police believed Adam Baker knew nothing about his wife's criminal enterprise, believing he thought the constant stream of visitors who showed up for hushed conversations with Elisa were just friends. I honestly can't even with this guy. He may be the most naive human being ever to exist. All I can say is that Elisa, who's almost certainly a sociopath, really knew how to choose her victims. In July of 2011, Elisa's attorney, Scott Riley, filed a change of venue motion, saying a fair trial in Catawba County would not be possible. In August, Superior Court Judge Timothy Kincaid approved the change of venue motion, saying the location of the trial would be decided in September. The case would be resolved, however, before that would be necessary. On September 15, 2011, Elisa Annette Baker accepted a plea agreement, pleading guilty to 9 felony charges, second-degree murder, her 7 drug charges, and obstruction of justice. By accepting this agreement, Elisa avoided a first-degree murder conviction and its possible sentence of life in prison or death. A lot of people, especially in North Carolina, were furious that she avoided the death penalty, but with the largely circumstantial evidence prosecutors had, especially when Casey Anthony's acquittal had taken place just 2 months before, I'm sure District Attorney Jay Gaither wasn't positive he could get a first-degree murder conviction. Just imagine if a jury had failed to convict Elisa Baker and she walked free. During the same hearing, Elisa also pleaded guilty to her bigamy charge. Elisa's official story, as told to the court by Captain Thurmond Wasnt, was that on September 24th, Zahra had been sick with a stomach bug and went to her bedroom to nap. Elisa said she went out for about 15 minutes to get cash, and when she returned at about 4 p.m., she found Zahra unresponsive in her bed. She claimed she gave Zahra CPR for about 20 minutes, but was unable to revive her. Elisa said she then called Adam and told him what happened. She and Adam decided they couldn't report Zahra's death to authorities because Adam was undocumented and therefore not a legal resident. That, of course, doesn't explain why they were later fine with calling the police to report Zahra missing, but let's just ignore that, right? Elisa told police Adam told her he would take care of it and cut up Zahra's body in the bathroom, placing the pieces into white trash bags. He said the next morning that he needed help finding places to dispose of the body. Captain Wasnt said the police found several inconsistencies in Elisa's story. For one thing, Adam was working the morning of September 25th when Elisa said the 2 of them together were scattering Zahra's body parts to the 4 winds. Cell phone records showed Adam Baker was nowhere near Elisa at that time. Instead, he was over 20 miles away in Conover, where co-workers and other witnesses placed him at work during that time. Cell phone records also showed that between 2 and 4 p.m. on September 24th, Elisa made a number of phone calls in Caldwell County, near where some of Zahra's remains were later found. Also at the sentencing hearing, FBI Special Agent Heath McBride testified that blood was found on a pair of Zahra's pants in a hall closet. Then a special high-intensity light revealed 18 pinhole-sized specks of blood on the wall beside Zahra's bed. He said the evidence showed Zahra's death was inconsistent with a death by natural causes. Both of Zahra's parents, Adam and Emily, told the court how disgusted they were by Elisa and how much the loss of their beloved daughter had affected them. In her statement, Emily said Zahra's death traumatized my family to the point of ripping it apart.
None of us know how we're meant to deal with such unimaginable things. Maybe to drill home the pure evil that Elisa has committed, I should reach down and find the strength to discuss how Zahra was pulled apart like some human puzzle and discarded like rubbish for wildlife to graze on.
We are trying to understand how such horrible things can happen to beautiful people. I wonder if Zahra is at peace. Is she cold, or is she somewhere the sun always shines? Is she wet, or does she feel the warmth of swimming through a wonderful dream? Emily said she was sorry that her postpartum depression led her to abandon Zahra. In his statement, Adam said, "Elisa, I trusted you with the most precious thing in my life. You not only lied to me, you lied to Zahra."
There are no words to explain the hate I have for you, or the hurt and the pain I feel every day for the loss of Zahra.
Elisa stared straight ahead, not even glancing at Adam. You know damn well she felt not a speck of remorse or guilt, not even a tiny twinge in her ice-cold black heart for the life of pain and torment her actions caused these people. Elisa's attorney, Scott Riley, asked Judge Timothy Kincaid for mercy for his client, and in his remarks, he even apologized to Adam, saying, "Elisa is emotionally devastated and wrecked. The only thing she wishes me to convey is that she is deeply sorry for the hurt she has caused." To the judge, Riley said, "Elisa had a choice. She could have kept her mouth shut, and this case never would have been solved. For once, she did the right thing." Judge Kincaid became emotional when handing down Elisa's sentence, saying, "The question the court has is twofold. What prompts a person to take the life of a helpless, defenseless child? The second question is, other than a violent homicide, we don't really know how this child died, and we may never know." At the end of the hearing, Elisa Baker was sentenced to a term of 14 years, 9 months to 18 years, 6 months in prison. DA Jay Gaither and Hickory Police Chief Tom Adkins gave a press conference. My apologies for the terrible sound quality. This was the only video I was able to find of the press conference, so I tried to improve it as much as possible.
After we reviewed all of the evidence that we had in our possession, and we assessed the slim possibility that existed of ever recovering Zahra's body, and recognizing that without more evidence the state had no case against Elisa Baker or any other suspect, the team concluded it was near certain that without the cooperation of Elisa Baker, the disappearance of Zahra would remain unsolved, and those responsible for her murder would go unpunished. As the burden of obtaining justice for Zahra weighed heavy on my office, I weighed carefully the risk versus the gain in indicting Elisa Baker for first-degree murder. I consulted with dozens of prosecutors, experts in the field of criminal law and criminal procedure, and with law enforcement. The uniform opinion of all counsel that I sought was to avoid the risk of having Elisa Baker go free and to pursue the second-degree charge. Up until pretty much the last 5 minutes of today's hearing, Elisa Baker, and I can promise you I give everybody as much due as I can, gave me no reason whatsoever to respect her or to feel anything other than that she was looking after Elisa Baker. And that was right up to the end in everything that she did. And one of the reasons I put this hearing on today, or helped put this hearing on today, is because in my entire life, I've never devoted more of my energy, more of my intellect, more of my effort, and my family's, law enforcement, to coming about to a decision. I'm not, as I said, going to lay it on anybody else, but at the same time, when I'm seeking counsel, and it's the best counsel I've ever had in my life, I'm not going to be the lone dissenting voice in that group that walks away and says, all of you guys are wrong, Jay Gaither is right. If the probability is that you're not going to find a body, and that the probability is that without that body you lack enough evidence to even indict anybody for murder, and an individual steps up and says, I can give you the cause, and I can give you the body, that's something you have to weigh pretty heavily. And if the deal is a deal that leaves first degree and death penalty on the table and gives you a full shot at second degree with all the evidence that's available, I call that a pretty good deal for the state. I embrace it tremendously and wholeheartedly, and feel that the elements in it are entirely favorable to the state. Let me repeat that. This woman gave evidence to the state and left death penalty on the table. That's a pretty good deal for the state. Now, we did our best over a 3-month period, considered the excluded evidence, to try to put together a first-degree murder case. Under tremendous pressure to do something during that time, as you may well recall, throughout December.
D.A. Gaither also said, "We're never quite sure why the defendant came forward. I think she was mortally afraid the police were closer than they were." Chief Adkins spoke at the press conference as well. The chief admitted they still didn't know exactly what happened.
There's only one person that knows, and she's not talking.
He added that others can help prevent future crimes like this. "I encourage you to report acts of violence and neglect against our children. Remember the spirit of a little girl that most of us never met, but who touched our lives. After the sentencing hearing, Adam Baker told a reporter,
It's sad when you get less than 20 years for taking a child's life.
Emily later told the press, I could only glare at Elisa for a moment. I mainly wanted her to see me, and for her to see the pain that she's caused on my face and my mother's face. Emily said she still had a lot of anger toward Adam, who she was once engaged to. She wondered why he didn't do more to protect Zahra. I still hold a lot of resentment towards him. There's a big difference between being not guilty and being innocent, and I don't think he is innocent of what happened. He had played all his own part. Emily had wanted to be in her daughter's life and searched for Zahra for years, finding out where she was just 3 days before she was reported missing. I can't explain the anger, the hurt. He had no right to do any of it to keep her from me. She found out Zahra and Adam were living in America when a friend emailed her a photo of Zahra at school just a few days before she was reported missing. Emily was ecstatic for a few days when she thought she would be reunited with her daughter.
I never got to say goodbye. I never got to say hello.
In January of 2012, after Adam Baker's worthless check charges were dropped and he received a suspended sentence for his other misdemeanor crimes, he received permission from the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office to go back to Australia and was subsequently deported. Over a year later, in 2013, Zahra's ashes were sent back to Australia. Adam had them scattered into the ocean at Nobby's Beach in Newcastle. In April of 2012, the Hickory Police Department announced that a hunter had found a skull off Winkler Way near Highway 268, and it was sent away for DNA testing. It was confirmed in February of 2013 that the skull was, indeed, Zahra's. In a press release, District Attorney Jay Gaither said, This information gives the members of Team Zahra mixed emotions. It brings up the tragedy of Zahra's death and the life she lived before she was killed, but it also gives us and the community a sense of finally bringing her home. The life and death of Zahra Baker profoundly impacted those who came to know this brave young lady through her tragic story. Zahra and her life will be forever in our thoughts, and Team Zahra will forever be connected through her spirit. In March of 2013, Elisa was sentenced for her felony drug charges. At that sentencing hearing, her federally appointed attorney talked about Elisa's addiction to the drugs and a personality disorder as reasons why she should be treated with compassion and why her federal sentence should be served concurrently with her state sentence. She said that Elisa's addiction to drugs came from her use of medication for anxiety and fibromyalgia, and that Elisa had changed for the better since being incarcerated. She didn't specifically name the personality disorder Elisa had supposedly been diagnosed with, but if I had to guess, I'd say the official diagnosis was probably borderline or narcissistic personality disorder, only because it seems a lot of mental health professionals shy away from diagnosing women with antisocial personality disorder. However, in my opinion, Elisa's behavior absolutely screams sociopath. Court documents stated that Elisa obtained the prescription drugs from physicians and other unidentified sources in Catawba County using a method law enforcement called doctor shopping. She possessed about 12,000 oxycodone pills, 10,000 hydrocodone pills, and 29,000 alprazolam pills. Prosecutors said she sold a very large amount of very deadly drugs out of the family home, using her bedroom as her office. Lead federal prosecutor Dana Washington said, She brought drug addicts, who were high and using drugs, into the home where she was responsible for the care of Zahra. Unlike her sentencing hearing for Zahra's murder, Elisa addressed the court at this hearing, saying, I apologize for my actions and take full responsibility for what I did. According to reporters present in the courtroom, Elisa was unwell through the proceedings, visibly affected by stress. Elisa was unable to stand. The judge was unmoved by the defense's attempts to soften Elisa, saying, These factors fall short coming up against the nature of the charges. He called Elisa's actions persistent criminal behavior and said he believed she would likely be involved in continued criminality behavior. He said, Drug addiction does not exculpate a defendant from a sentence. After the hearing, Elisa's father, Marshall Fairchild, spoke publicly for the first time, saying, I just can't see her doing that to that young'un. I can't believe it. I've been like that ever since she was arrested. He told another reporter that he believed Adam was responsible for Zahra's death. He had a real high temper. I believe he had something to do with it. Elisa's 10 years of federal prison time will start after the 14 to 18 years she is to serve for Zahra's murder, so Elisa may be in her 70s before she walks free. She was also ordered to serve 3 years under court supervision after she has completed her prison term. On March 20th, 2013, she was committed to the Raleigh, North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. In May of 2013, Elisa granted WSOC-TV a very self-serving prison interview.
You worried about being here?
Yes.
What worries you the most?
The name calling.
Has that happened?
Yes.
What do they call you?
Baby killer. They're just picking at me right now because I'm new and my case was so high profile. That's what they keep telling me, that it'll go away.
Zahra was a blessing. I didn't see her chest moving up and down. Automatically, I got scared, started doing CPR.
Most people would have called 911. That's what you do.
Yeah, that was my biggest mistake. We need to go ahead and call 911. He said, Lisa, sit down, take you some medicine, calm down, I'll take care of it. He said, you're going to take your medicine and everything's going to be fine. I've got a plan. So I thought maybe it was a strange ritual that he done. For all I know, the Aborigines, I don't know.
Lisa, did you murder Zahra Baker?
No. And they had no evidence of her being murdered.
She also granted a prison interview to 60 Minutes Australia.
What kind of person dismembers a disabled child?
A sick person.
Does it take an evil person?
Yes.
It's an evil act?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you sleep at night knowing that a little girl, a little disabled girl, was cut into pieces and thrown away?
Some nights are hard, but I miss her.
Do you really?
Yes, ma'am. I thought I had met Prince Charming.
Adam was your Prince Charming?
Yeah.
What drew you to him? What did you like about him?
What I thought was his honesty about everything, and the fact that he was a single dad and that he loved his daughter enough to raise her himself and not let his family or her family raise Zahra. Me and my husband had went through several bad years, and it was my understanding when I went to Australia that he filed for divorce. So it was my belief that I was divorced.
Why did you introduce your husband as your brother?
That's the way he left it, because he wanted to be in Zahra's life, and he knew that Adam wouldn't let him be in Zahra's life if he knew that he was my husband.
None of that makes sense.
I know it doesn't.
How did you view yourself before coming to prison? What sort of person do you believe you were?
Good person. Pretty much would give you the shirt off my back. Never met a stranger. Still don't, even in here.
Tell me about your relationship with Zahra.
We hit it off right from the bat.
What did you like about Zahra?
She had spunk about her. She never gave up. Always had a smile on her face. Always.
Did you have a close bond?
Very close. She called me Mom, and I treated her like she was my own child. She got no different treatment than my other kids did. Actually, my other kids got jealous of her. They said I treated her better.
Why were so many people worried about her? Why would a school teacher give her her own personal cell number and say to her, if you ever need me, call me?
That right there was out of protocol. I even said something to the principal about that. Me and Adam went, because that was against the rules. They should not have ever done that.
Why did you sign a piece of paper here that admitted that you have a history and a pattern of physical, verbal and psychological abuse of Zahra?
I never signed that paper.
You did? There's your signature.
no case somebody's had me sign something I shouldn't have signed, because that's not so.
That's not your signature? Along with your attorney? That's not your signature?
That's my plea bargain, right?
Yes, but you signed that you accept that you had a history and a pattern of physical, verbal and psychological abuse of Zahra.
That was in with my plea bargain. Yes,
so you
ma'am.
signed it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Tell me about the day that Zahra died.
By this time, it was like three, somewhere around in there. And she was laying on her bed. And I said, Zahra, are you okay? And I walked over to the bed and I said, Zahra. She still didn't move. I put my hand on her and I could tell she wasn't breathing. And my first thought was CPR. And so I immediately started CPR. I worked on her for probably about 30 minutes and couldn't get her back. Begging the whole time for God not to take her, you know. Right then, I should have called 911. But I got scared.
Of what?
I didn't know what to do. I've never been faced with anything like that. I've never...
If you'd done CPR, you'd dial 911, wouldn't you?
Most people would have, yes.
If we're going to believe anything you say, why would you ring the police and say, I'm not having a part of this? That is the most heinous thing to do.
He was my husband.
Please. That's not good enough. It's not. It's just not good enough. You know that.
I know.
Of course, the evidence doesn't show that what you're saying is the truth, does it?
It does to a point, but there's a little bit.
Not even to a point. The phone records show that on the day the body was disposed of, the day that you told police it was disposed of, there was something like 9 calls, and many of those calls were to Adam. Why would you call him if he's right beside you?
He was calling my phone. I wasn't calling his because he kept losing my phone.
No, you were calling him.
I wasn't calling him.
Phone records show that he was 20 miles away. He wasn't with you, was he?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think so. That's the truth, isn't it?
No, ma'am.
Did you murder Zahra?
No, ma'am.
Why do you deny this when the evidence is overwhelmingly that you did?
Because I'll continue to stand by my story.
You'll continue to lie?
No, I'll stand by my story.
Scott Riley, your lawyer, said that the evidence was overwhelmingly against you. I think he said that the evidence was such that it would take a jury something like 5 minutes to convict you.
Something like that.
Well, if your own lawyer says that, what does it say about you?
That nobody was listening to what I was saying. They were going by circumstantial evidence. They weren't going by anything I was saying.
How did you feel when her body parts were found? How did you feel about that?
Relieved.
Why?
Because she was going to be all put back into one.
And when her skull was found?
I was relieved as well because it showed no abuse.
You thought that got you off the hook?
No.
You're innocent. Fight it. Why didn't you?
You heard the evidence against me.
Well, that means, from what I could see, you are as guilty as sin. You are a guilty woman, and you will not take responsibility for your actions.
There again, that's your opinion.
It's the opinion of the state. It's an opinion of the lawmakers. It is the opinion of your own family.
Some of my family.
You have to accept that the evidence is against you.
Yes, ma'am, I know that.
Why then am I not looking at one of the most reviled evil women in America.
Probably in your eyes you think you are.
No remorse?
I have remorse.
What is it?
I wish things would have been different.
Well, you have a long time to consider it.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Some good, at least, has come from Zahra's death. On November 16, 2011, which would have been Zahra's 12th birthday, construction began on a fully accessible playground dedicated to Zahra. On May 19, 2012, the Zahra Baker Memorial Playground, located at 805 6th Street Southeast in Hickory, was officially opened and dedicated to Zahra's memory. Fundraising efforts for the playground project raised about $225,000, of which about $18,000 was left unused after the playground was built. The leftover funds would later be used to build a treehouse at the park, also accessible to all children, even those in wheelchairs. In December of 2011, legislation inspired by Zahra went into effect in North Carolina. North Carolina Law 14-401.22d reads, "Any person who attempts to conceal evidence of the death of another by knowingly and willfully dismembering or destroying human remains, by any means, including removing body parts or otherwise obliterating any portion thereof, shall be guilty of a Class H felony." Subsection E goes on, "Any person who violates subsection D of this section, knowing or having reason to know the human remains are of a person that did not die of natural causes, shall be guilty of a Class D felony." On November 16, 2012, what would have been Zahra's 13th birthday, the memorial on Christie Road was formally dedicated. The memorial, covered by a structure built by a local contractor, held various angels, teddy bears, and other toys left by mourners under a sign quoting Matthew 19:14, "Safe at home with Jesus." Jake Eisenhower, the man responsible for Zahra's memorial at Christie Road, is now 85 years old, but he is still dedicated to maintaining the memorial and keeping Zahra's memory alive. Around the 10-year anniversary of Zahra's disappearance, WSOC-TV caught up with him and he told them he still visits Zahra's memorial every day. "How can anyone do something like that? How can you chop somebody up and scatter them? What kind of a person can do something like that?" Jake keeps up Zahra's memorial to remind others about the little girl he never met and other cases of child abuse. "Maybe I'll be blessed for doing it. The community needs to know what happened here. Everybody needs to know." In August of 2015, Elisa was convicted of theft of property while in prison. Still up to her old tricks, I see. In 2016, she gave another jailhouse interview, saying she was rushed into signing a plea agreement and planned to appeal her conviction. She still did not take responsibility for Zahra's murder, saying, "I was a good mama." By then, her time period to appeal had expired, but she planned to try anyway. Even her former attorney, Scott Riley, said the evidence against Elisa was overwhelming, and that if she appealed her conviction and was retried, she could risk being sentenced to life in prison. From what I could find, it does not appear that Elisa has yet attempted to appeal. She may be in prison until 2039. District Attorney Jay Gaither ran for re-election in 2014 against a candidate named David Lerner and none other than Scott Riley, Elisa Baker's criminal defense attorney. At the time, Gaither was entrenched in a scandal, accused of harassing and groping a woman who formerly served as assistant district attorney. He claimed she had a vendetta against him for catching her having an affair with a local defense attorney. Anyway, during the 2014 race for DA, Gaither brought up some interesting information that hadn't come up before, alleging that Scott Riley hampered the investigation into Zahra's death. Evidently, before Elisa Baker and her attorney told law enforcement where they would find Zahra's remains, Scott Riley and private investigator Steve Ehlers went on a quest to corroborate Elisa's story on October 22, 2010, following her imprecise directions to where she said the evidence could be found. While they didn't locate any of Zahra's remains at the time, they did find a hacksaw Elisa had thrown into a storm drain in Hudson and took it with them, saying they were afraid rain forecast for the next day would wash the saw away. According to Rule 3.4 of the North Carolina State Bar Rules of Professional Conduct, an attorney is allowed to take temporary possession of evidence of a crime committed by their client to conduct a limited examination that does not alter, destroy, or conceal the evidence in any way. Riley insisted he did not mishandle or compromise the evidence, and he said he called Gaither's office on the morning of October 23rd, but Gaither did not return his call until the following day, at which point the saw was handed over to law enforcement. Both Riley and the third candidate, David Lerner, told reporters that the timing of this revelation was suspect, and it was likely brought up as a distraction from Gaither's own issues. The winner of the 2014 district attorney election was David Lerner, the only candidate in no way associated with Zahra's case. In 2017, Gaither settled the sexual harassment lawsuit against him. Details of the settlement were not made public. In 2018, Scott Riley ran again for district attorney and unseated incumbent David Lerner. Riley was sworn into office in January of 2019. On June 30, 2016, Hickory Police Chief Tom Adkins retired after 9 years in his position. 22-year department veteran and then Deputy Chief Thurman Wasnt, who testified at Elisa Baker's sentencing hearing, was promoted to the position of chief. Former Chief Adkins made a statement saying, "I want the citizens to know they have a great organization of police professionals serving this community with the do-right mentality. I am confident in Chief Wasnt's ability to lead the great men and women of the Hickory Police Department." As of 2016, Adam Baker lived in Western Sydney, but his current whereabouts are unknown. For him, I'm sure it's better this way. A lot of people think he should have faced criminal charges for what they believe was his involvement in Zahra's death, or at least her dismemberment. They say ignorance is bliss, but in Adam Baker's case, I doubt bliss is something he experiences often. To quote Australian news site The Advertiser, "There is plenty of evidence against Elisa Baker, but Adam's culpability over his daughter's death is not the kind that can be put before a jury. In America, we can't prosecute someone solely for making terrible decisions. This, like many of the stories I cover, is another case in which someone with a disordered personality took advantage of a vulnerable person, won them over, and subsequently destroyed their life and took the life of their child. I can't preach this often enough. Our children and teenagers need education, formal or otherwise, or both, on the signs of narcissistic or sociopathic behavior in potential romantic partners, beginning with love bombing, which is how these people suck in their victims. This may be an unpopular opinion, but I hope Adam has been able to find some peace since Zahra's death. I'm sure he regrets his decisions and his mistakes every day of his life." Before I end this episode, I want to talk about Zahra herself. On November 16, 2020, she would have celebrated her 21st birthday. Instead, her memory is forever frozen at the age of 10, and the image of her sweet, freckled little face will forever remind people of the horrific crimes her stepmother committed against her. What we can never forget is that Zahra was a person, with promise and potential, surrounded by family and friends who adored and cherished her, and will never be whole without her. Kim Wright, a friend of the Baker family in Australia, befriended Zahra at a cancer fundraising event. Kim was sitting in a chair, waiting for her head to be shaved to raise money, when little Zahra came up to her, held her hand, and told her not to be scared. Kim said of Zahra, "She was one of the bravest little girls you'll ever have the pleasure of meeting. She was always thinking of others." According to Zahra's obituary, she was a strong, courageous, and fun person who was everyone's friend and protective of her family and friends. Zahra never met a stranger and was an inspiration to all those who knew her. She had a beautiful smile, an energetic personality, and a wonderful sense of humor that gave her the ability to turn the worst possible situation into a fun situation. Zahra was a very strong-willed individual that allowed her not to hold anything back. She taught her physicians and doctors not to set boundaries. She would set her own boundaries. Zahra was very athletic and won several swimming races in Australia. She attended Granite Falls Elementary School and Hudson Elementary School, where she was on the A and B honor roll. Zahra's favorite color was purple. She has been described as sometimes shy but always smiling, as well as bubbly and determined. She never let her disability sour her positive attitude. She deserves to be remembered. Rest forever in peace, Zahra Claire Baker. We remember you. That's it for this week, guys. Join me next week for another case. If you like the show, please leave me a 5-star rating and a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. And please subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast listening app. Email tips, comments, questions, or case suggestions to sufferthelittlechildren.pod@gmail.com. You can also subscribe on YouTube by searching Suffer the Little Children Podcast. Visit the website at www.sufferthelittlecHildrenPod.com, where you can listen to episodes and become a patron for rewards ranging from a shout-out by name on the show to exclusive gifts. Follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Pinterest at Suffer the Little Children Pod, and on Twitter at STLCPod. View photos related to today's case on Facebook and Instagram. Read more about today's case and many others at SufferTheLittleChildrenBlog.com. This podcast was written, hosted, edited, and produced by Lane. Intro theme music is by Dream Note Music. Other music and sound effects for the show were created using sounds from audiojungle.net. Hug your babies a bit closer tonight. Until next week, bye guys.